If you haven't seen lesson 1, we suggest you do so to better understand where we are at. For purposes of this tape, I am assuming you already know the basics of DOS. If you don't, you will need to view the tape, Learn DOS, Lesson 1. In this tape, you will learn about hard or fixed disks, batch files, directories and subdirectories, function keys or hotkeys, and much, much more. The first thing you will want to do is make a copy of your DOS system disk. You want to do this because there are many ways of destroying your disk, like someone spilling coffee, a cigarette falling and burning it, or you could mangle or crush your disk. So treat your disk with care, especially your original one. In fact, I recommend you make a copy of every disk you work with. Your disks are good friends, but easily damaged. Once lost or broken, the information you have stored on that disk is gone forever. Always work with your backup copy whenever possible and store the original in a safe place. To copy your system disk, put your system disk in drive A and a blank disk in drive B. Then type disk copy space A:, space B:, and press the Enter key. A message will appear telling you where to put your diskettes and to press any key when you are ready. The computer now displays a message telling you exactly what is going on. Type an N for no when the computer asks you if you want to format another disk. You have something else to do before you carefully store your original system disk and continue to work with your system copy. First, make out a label identifying your disk and affix it to the disk. Then affix a Write Protect tab over this little open block on your disk. This prevents the information on the disk from being erased accidentally. Here are some hints about correct care and storage. Keep away from tobacco smoke. Keep out of direct sunlight. Store away from magnetic sources, including the tops of TVs, computers, etc. Store your data disks in their sleeves in an upright position. And store them in a plastic dust-free container. Cardboard boxes create their own paper dust. Let's get back to DOS. When you begin, you will start to create files. Choosing file names correctly will be a big help to you. There are 3 questions you need to answer in this procedure. Is it descriptive enough to be recognizable later? Is it unique? Does it fit in the file naming system? A file name has 2 parts, the file name and the extension. These are poor file names because they don't tell us enough. The LTR stands for letter. Are you going to just write one letter in your files? How are you going to tell the difference if the file name for all your letters is LTR? You need to add more information so the file will be more recognizable when you go back to it sometime later. Take a look at these file names. In the first, we have abbreviated memo. In the second, we have abbreviated budget. John Dart, February 26th, is MEMJD226. Remember also that a DOS file name can have no more than 8 characters in the name and no more than 3 characters in the extension. So this is a legal DOS name. Vacation clothes equals VACABUDG.DOC. Also, legal file names cannot include anything DOS uses for command punctuations. Now, here are my helpful hints to choosing file names. Use as few letters as possible, but use enough to make the file recognizable. An example would be to use more letters than just VB for vacation budget. Use dates according to how often a file is updated or whether it is updated at all. Be consistent with your system. An example would be to be consistent in how you abbreviate months in your file names. If you do have a bad file name, you can correct this with the rename command. This will not alter the contents of your file, but merely change the name of the file itself and record that change on the disk. The rename command is a 3-part command. You have the rename, the old name with its extension, new name and its extension. Be sure you get the spacing correct in this command. Here's a word of caution. Be sure you are in the appropriate drive when you attempt to rename your file. If you are in the C drive and your file is in the drive A, you need to include the different drive in your command. Now, there is at least one thing about choosing good file names: consistency. It is a good idea to keep the naming of your files consistent. This will let you work with different sets of related files at the same time. Well, let's look at this set of files. You could call up all the files with the same beginning letters, or with all the same extensions, or with the same file names but different extensions. To do this, you use a command called a wildcard or global command. Like in some card games, when a joker or a deuce is wild, it can stand for any character. Here's how you use a wildcard in commands. Asterisks can take the place of any character or group of characters, either the first part of the file name or the file name extension. Or to see all the files ending with the DOC extension, use an asterisk in place of the file name. You can also call up the middle of a file name using the question mark form of the wildcard. The question mark takes the place of a single character, but the rest of the name must match exactly. Copy A:** space B:**. This wildcard command will copy every file on the disk in drive A to the disk in drive B. You have the basic idea. The wildcard rules are really very simple. They can be used with almost all DOS commands, including copy, rename, and DIR. Okay, let's talk about directories and subdirectories. A thorough understanding of this topic will make it easier for you to use the large amount of storage space available on your disk. When you go to a library, all the books on science are arranged together. The books about cooking are all together, and the books for children are put together. On the shelves for science books, we will find books about astronomy in one place, but separated from those about microbiology. Notice that in this classification system, books are arranged both by subject matter and by intended reader. For example, the children's library books will also have a section on children's science books. Your hard disk is like a library building with room for lots and lots of information. Are there several people using the computer in one office? Then maybe you'll want each user to have their own special area and also have access to some areas that have programs that everyone will use, such as a word processor. A map of this type of arrangement would look like this. Each of these boxes is a directory that can hold files or other directories. We refer to this as a tree structure because viewed upside down, it looks like a tree. The name of this first directory, the root directory, comes from this idea of tree-like branching structures. In this example, Tom, Mary, and Sue all have their own directories and subdirectories. There are as many ways to organize your hard disk as there are people. The most important thing is that you take a few minutes to think about how the computer is going to be used and by whom. You don't have to plan the entire organization at once, as you can add and remove subdirectories later, but will save time if you think a little bit about your fundamental organization now. It is helpful to have DOS in a separate section by itself. Each section is called a subdirectory. Each subdirectory may be further subdivided into more subdirectories. DOS creates 2 small files for each subdirectory created. You will see these listed like this. These files are just part of the bookkeeping functions of DOS, but they do take up room, so be sure to group your files so you're not wasting room unnecessarily. As we said before, the uppermost directory is called the root directory, and the root directory is given a special symbol, the backslash. Whenever you see the backslash in a DOS command, it refers to the root directory. So now we need to make a new subdirectory called DOS. Let's switch over to the hard drive by entering C:, and press Enter. Now to make a directory, the command is simply MKDIR, or MD for short, then the name of the new directory. So we'll type MD space DOS and press Enter. Now type DIR to check the directory of the root directory, and we'll see the new subdirectory we've created. And there it is. Next, we must change to that subdirectory to be able to work in it. The command is CHDIR, or CD for short. Then the name of the subdirectory to which we want to change to. Now, type in CD space DOS and hit the Enter key. Okay, we're in the subdirectory DOS. Now let's copy the files from our system disk, which is still in drive A. If you have a disk of supplemental programs that came with your DOS program, you may want to copy them into the DOS subdirectory also. You do this by typing in copy space A:* *** and press Enter. Now the files are being copied from A drive into our DOS subdirectory. Now this will take a while to complete copying all the files, so I think we'll just jump ahead, clear the screen, and check the directory. We're doing fine. Now let's create a few practice subdirectories and work with them until you're very comfortable with moving around between subdirectories. Let's clear the screen again and move back to the root directory like this by typing in CD / and press Enter. Let's create a subdirectory called Budget by typing in MD space Budget. And we'll change to that Budget subdirectory by typing CD space Budget. Now type MD space Personal. And then MD space Business. And last, MD space Children. Now we can change to the Children's subdirectory by typing CD space Children and press Enter. If we check the directory listing, we will indeed see that we are in the subdirectory Children of the subdirectory Budget. Now suppose we need to go back to the DOS subdirectory. We could go back to the Budget subdirectory, back to the root directory, and then down to the subdirectory. But fortunately, we can take a shortcut. Clear the screen and type CD / and press Enter. We can go directly to the DOS subdirectory from the Children's subdirectory by using the shortcut followed by DOS like this, CD / DOS, and press Enter. Let's go now from the DOS subdirectory to the directory of Personal. Type CD / Budget / Personal and press Enter. The / directs DOS back through the root directory, down to the Budget subdirectory, and finally to the Personal subdirectory. For practice, let's move from the Personal subdirectory to the Business subdirectory. Although these are connected at the Budget subdirectory level, we must move through the root directory like this, CD / Budget / Business. And press Enter. All these routes that we have been traveling to go from one subdirectory to another are called paths. You will see paths used in two different ways. First, a file name can have a special front part called a path name. It simply tells where the file is located. Clear the screen for our example. If we are on drive A, we may want to copy a file located on the floppy disk in drive A to the subdirectory Personal. Type in copy space ANSI.SYS space C:/ Budget / Personal and press Enter. Or we could copy it back by typing in copy space C:/ Budget / Personal / ANSI.SYS. You'll notice I've used some shortcuts here. In the first example, I didn't retype the name of the file. I didn't need to because I wanted the copy to have the same name as the original. In the second example, I didn't tell DOS where to copy the file to. If I don't tell DOS where, it will copy it to the place from which I issue the command, in this case the root directory of drive A. Oh yes, you can have subdirectories on a floppy disk too. Usually, a floppy disk is not subdivided as it is small enough to keep data easily organized, but you may have subdirectories on floppy disks if you wish. We can use the idea of paths to open a permanent channel to a directory. If, for example, we open a path to our DOS directory, we can execute the format command from any other directory without having to change to the DOS directory. To make a path for DOS to use, we use the path command. Let's go to the root directory and make a path for DOS subdirectory. Type in C:, then CD \, then type in path \DOS. And now we have opened a path into our DOS subdirectory. When you have quite a lot of subdirectories, to remember them all can sometimes get very difficult. DOS has solved that problem for you with the tree command. Just use the tree command and it will list all the subdirectories and their subdirectories. Here, let's try it. Just type in tree and press enter. See what I mean? Here's a list of all the directories and their subdirectories just as tree found them. Let's see that again. Next, we must learn to remove a directory. The command is RMDIR, or RD for short, and the name of the subdirectory. To remove a subdirectory, the subdirectory must first be entirely empty. To demonstrate, let's remove all of our budget subdirectories. First, we change to the budget subdirectory by typing CD \budget, and then remove the budget subdirectory by typing RD personal, and press enter. Oops, we have an error message. Actually, I had this happen so you would understand that you can't erase a subdirectory while there are files or subdirectories in that directory. Remember, we added the file ansi.sys to our subdirectory personal in our subdirectory budget. So let's delete ansi.sys from our personal subdirectory so we can remove personal from the directory. Remember how to delete a file from Learn DOS Lesson 1? Type CD space personal to get into the subdirectory, and then type del space ansi.sys and press enter. There, our file is deleted. Now clear the screen and type CD \budget to get back to our budget subdirectory. Now let's remove the subdirectories to the budget subdirectory by typing in RD space personal. Then type in RD space business. Press enter. Type in RD space children and press enter again. Now let's move up one level. Type in CD \, and press enter. And remove the budget subdirectory by typing RD space budget and press enter. We have covered a lot of territory since our last review. Let's take a moment to check back on what else we've learned. 1. Directories start with a root. 2. Subdirectories are a means of organizing large numbers of files in a logical manner under a root. 3. Subdirectories can be organized in any manner that makes sense to the user. 4. Subdirectories are found using \/ or question marks. 5. MD space name makes a new subdirectory. 6. CD space name changes to the named subdirectory. 7. Path refers to the path DOS will take to find files. 8. Path name refers to the location of the file in path type terminology added to the front of the regular file name. 9. Tree displays the structure of the drive, all the subdirectories and their subdirectories. 10. RD removes a subdirectory. Batch files are simply a group of DOS commands that are grouped together in a file. For example, a batch file can be used to quickly get in a subdirectory, start a program, and exit that subdirectory when the program is done. Another use of a batch file is to display a simple menu of the programs a user might wish to access. Batch files can save you time and keystrokes. All batch files have the file name extension BAT. All batch files are simply collections of valid DOS commands. A batch file can start a program such as your word processing program, but cannot execute any of the commands within that program. When a computer is booted up from either a floppy system disk in drive A or from a hard disk, DOS searches for a special batch file in the root directory called AUTOEXEC.BAT. If found, DOS will execute or run this file. Notice how the name of the file suggests what it does? Here is an example of a sample batch file. The file contains only two commands: change directory to the LOTUS directory and the 123 command to start LOTUS 123. We call this batch file RUN.BAT. We can execute it by typing the word run at the DOS prompt. Now let's make a batch file. The easiest way to make a batch file is with the copy-con command. You could also use a text editor to make a batch file. We are going to use a command in our batch file which you haven't seen. It is the prompt command. This command has several optional ways of changing the appearance of the DOS prompt. We will be using the string P and string G options. Make this file an AUTOEXEC file. After copy-con, type AUTOEXEC.BAT and then press enter. On the next line, we should put our first DOS command. Let's use path/DOS and then press enter. This will open a path to DOS. Then on the next line, we will put our prompt command and the optional string P, string G. To end the process, we use either a Control-Z or the F6 key. Either one does the same thing. It ends our file and takes us back to the DOS prompt. Press enter. The one file copied message tells us that we have a new file on our disk named AUTOEXEC. Let's execute this program and see the effects. We execute a batch file by typing the file name without the extension, like this. Because this is an AUTOEXEC file, DOS will run it every time the computer is booted up. Let's change to the DOS directory. Our prompt now tells us what directory we are currently in. Let's clear the screen. As you can see, our new program has opened a channel to the DOS directory, and now let's change back to the root directory and ask DOS what our path is. By using the path command, we can see that our AUTOEXEC program opened a path to DOS. Let's look at another example of making a batch file. Let's call this one jets.bat. In it, we can change directories to one called games. We open a path to DOS. We start our program called jets. And when we are done with jets, we go back to the root directory. The Control-Z ends our file. Batch files need to be practiced for ease of use. However, they are well worth it. Batch files are used to combine DOS and file commands. An AUTOEXEC.BAT file can have DOS automatically include time and date, set a path to DOS, set up a prompt command, and execute every time the computer is turned on. Use copy-con for the simplest way to create batch files. Finish batch commands with F6 or Control-Z. Now, let's take a look at hard or fixed disks. Your hard drive is usually referred to as the C drive. The advantages of a hard disk are that it can hold enormous amounts of information and can move information at a higher rate of speed than a floppy disk. As a matter of fact, it would take 54 360K floppy disks to hold as much information as one 20-megabyte hard drive. If we had a race between the hard drive and a floppy drive, the hard drive would win hands down. Before we begin to get into the specifics of hard disks, you should be aware that although the hard disk functions the same way in every system, the commands for setting up the hard disk may vary with different versions of MS-DOS operating systems. For example, one system may use FDISK, where another may call the same setup program HDISK. Therefore, our discussion will cover the general ins and outs of setting up hard disks, and you will have to refer to your manual to discover the specific commands used to perform the functions I'll be describing for the next few minutes. Because of their high storage densities and some users' requirements for 2 or more operating systems, the formatting of hard drives can be a two-stage process. The first stage is called low-level formatting and is usually done with a program called FDISK. Low-level formatting with the entire disk set for one operating system is usually done by the manufacturer. First, boot your computer. The A prompt will be displayed. Now enter the appropriate command for the hard disk setup utility referenced in your manual. When the menu appears, select the command for the installation operation. Generally, the program will then ask you if you wish to use the entire fixed disk for MS-DOS. Let's answer yes to this question so we can use the entire hard disk for DOS. The FDISK program will take some time for the entire procedure, so we will be stepping ahead. Now we need to press Enter to reset and update the system. At the DOS prompt, enter format space C:/S and press Enter. The computer will ask if we're sure we want to proceed. We answer yes. We can see the computer is working, formatting the disk. The larger the hard disk, the more time this operation will take. Let's just jump to the end. The system will tell us when the formatting is complete. It will then ask us for the volume and the label we prefer. The most recent versions of DOS allow us to add this label later or to rename it. Now let's tackle our last topic, function or F keys. Function keys are used primarily by application programs or by programming languages to perform special functions. For example, in some programs, pressing F1 brings up a help file on the screen to help you. The action the function key causes depends on how the application program was designed. DOS also uses some of the function keys. They are most useful for correcting a long and complex DOS command which you may have entered with a typing mistake. For example, suppose we typed and entered copy space A:"this.bat space C:/budgets. Now obviously we meant budgets. Instead of having to retype the line, we can use the F3 key to duplicate the line and then use the backspace key to correct the misspelling. If the misspelling were near the beginning, we could use the F1 key to duplicate the line one letter at a time. In our example on the screen, we are entering the line letter by letter using the F1 key. In another example, we use the F1 key to move partway through the line and the F3 key to go to the end. F2 followed by a character will take us instantly to the first occurrence of that character. This is most useful for errors in the middle of a long command. In this mistake, it's the letter T. Even if you don't make mistakes, the F3 key can be useful for commands that you want to repeat anytime you want to repeat a command over and over and over. Use the F3 key. As you can see, the function keys are very useful for repeating commands or for correcting mistakes in DOS commands. Well, that's all I have to say about DOS right now. In closing, I'm going to show you 4 mistakes that you'll want to cry about. The first is permanently erasing valuable files by formatting a disk that has no backup. This is especially hazardous if the disk is reformatted since it can contain so much data. To avoid this mistake, always back up your files from the hard disk to one or more floppy disks before formatting. As we cautioned at the beginning of this tape, accidents will happen, either physical or mental. Mistake number 2 occurs when you make a file or copy a file on a disk that has the same name as a file already on the disk. For example, the old car.dat file will be overwritten by our new car.dat file. To be safe, check your directory by asking the directory command to call up that file. If your computer answers with file not found, you are safe to use the file you are thinking about. Mistake number 3 is deleting too many files with the wildcard. When you use the delete command with a wildcard command, DOS doesn't care what you want. DOS just deletes all the files that match your command. DOS will not ask you if you want to verify before making the deletion. DOS will delete all the files in the directory matching this specification. If you had wanted to delete only one file, you would have been out of luck. To avoid making mistakes, test your wildcard by using the directory or dir command. This will list all the files that match the wildcard you think you want to use. In our example, we got a directory of the MOM files, and if they are what we expected, we type in our delete command. So now we've seen our files, and therefore Know which ones we are deleting. Mistake you'll want to cry about number 4 has to do with the saving your files as you work. Strange things happen to electrical current as it comes into your computer. You don't always hit the commands you intend, and components can fail. If any of these things happen after you've been working for an hour or two and you have neglected to save your work, it will be lost forever. My rule is try to save every half hour. Well, that's the end of Lesson 2. Lesson 3 will pick up right where we left off.